there's a lot of books out there on how to do things, like how to do things in a certain software application, how to do things in, two-dimensional, three-dimensional software. There's books on design principles. There's lots of books on design history. But I found very few books, if any, that talked about the mindset and attitude required to be successful in design.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the next episode of Office Hour Tangents, where I usually come in here and talk about the tangents that I may or may not have went on in class. Today is a little special. Didn't have class today. It's a Friday, but I have a special guest. And as you can see, he's right here. He is one of my mentors. I would say my mentor. Before I introduce him, I'm going to talk about how we met first, as a sort of introduction. I graduated University of Pittsburgh, and my first professional job I got was an intern at Nationwide Insurance. And I came in as an intern for 3 months, and they hired me as full-time. And I think I was full-time for maybe a year, a little under a year. And they brought in some other interns from Ohio State. Or I might have been part of that cohort. I felt like I was a part of this second cohort of interns. And with that cohort, they also brought in a faculty member. And this is the faculty member, Brian Stone. So they brought him in the summers, and he would maybe come in like once a week. You can correct me, like during the, off summers. But in the summers, he was basically full time there. And they brought him in to be a mentor to us design interns, as far as like graphic design, interaction design, which I was very, very green in at the time, so on and so forth. So he came in, and I felt like he was my second ever graphic design instructor. That's how I felt, because I didn't study graphic design in undergrad. I studied architecture studies. So it was more fine arts and architecture. So when I met this guy right here, he basically was schooling me on how to be a graphic designer, whether he knew it or not. Okay, so fast forward, we're working at Nationwide as colleagues for basically my rest of my career at Nationwide for the next like 6 years. And we was doing something, I can't remember, and I told him that I would be a great trainer or a great teacher. I think I was like, man, I'll be a great teacher. And look, I didn't know this, but he wrote that down, like on a sticky note, and he put it somewhere. And then one day I approached him like, hey, this like office space environment is getting to me. I want to do bigger and better things. I want to do more with the businesses I had, and with some advice. And I was looking for some advice going back to school. And I initially just wanted to get my MBA because I wanted to be a better business person. But he told me to go talk to another one of my mentors, Noel Mayo, to just kind of see what I wanted to do. I went and talked to him. And then fast forward a year later, I was in the master's program. And he was my, what would you call it? Not a sponsor, but
Committee member.
Committee member.
Yeah,
So
thesis committee member.
So, and that's how we met. And he's been mentoring me and kind of guiding me through this design process and also my educational process, because the ways that I kind of started teaching full time is because of him too, because of a call from FAMU. So, introductions. Professor of design, and I wrote some stuff down so I didn't mess it up too much, but I don't do very well with writing stuff down. If anybody's watched any of these podcasts, you notice that I'm just kind of freestyling everything. But professor of design with specialties in motion, I'll say infographics, UI and UX design. He is the co-founder of the Mode Summit, which is a dope. What year are we on now?
10.
Year 10.
10 years.
Of the Mode Summit. It's a conference, and this year is going to be in Prague. So that shows the breadth of this summit, and it's It specializes in motion design education, but it also bleeds into all different kinds of design education, right? He is an author, two-time author. We'll get into the second book he just wrote later. And he is my friend, my mentor, Brian Stone.
So what I wanted to say first, Brandon, is it's hard to believe that you and I have been having conversations for almost 25 years. And I have missed them. We don't talk as much as we used to now that you're in one location and I'm in another location. We're not in Columbus any longer. But they're always very energetic, engaging conversations. You'd be very surprised at the things that you've said to me that I've kind of stored in my head.
Yeah.
Thank you for the invitation. Looking forward to the discussion.
Cool. So before we get into I would say the things around education and design, I just want to ask you, how are you experiencing music right now?
Oh, okay. I love this question.
Yep.
Let me rewind just a bit. My father was a professor of jazz studies at Howard University. And he was a composer and author and musician. So growing up, we heard music in our home every single day. All right. So music has always been a very important aspect of my life. I listen to a lot of music. I have a very sort of diverse palette. So I will listen to a lot of native tongue. I'll listen to classical. I listen to a lot of Brazilian bossa nova. And if the mood strikes me, I'll even listen to Johnny Cash. I use if I can talk about a specific application,
Yep.
I use YouTube music.
Okay.
And one of the things I like about YouTube music, and I imagine some of the other platforms have this, is that you can curate your playlists, but then at the end of your playlist, the machine learning figures out other songs that are sort of relevant to your playlist. So I start to discover more music in those specific genres, and then my playlists get bigger and broader. And I really like that. And then every now and then, you can flip over from music to video if there was a music video available. And every now and then I do that, and I see these music videos from, from the 80s, and it just cracks me up.
Right.
But one other thing, and I listen to my music primarily through, and I know we talk about a lot of technological inventions over the last quarter century. Noise canceling headphones. Oh my gosh, these things are great. I couldn't go anywhere without them.
You are a champ. You've been a champion of noise canceling headphones for as long as I can remember. I remember the first time I think you got some Bose, and you just came back from a trip, and you was like, I couldn't, you was on an airplane, and it's the best invention ever. I remember you saying that. I remember you saying that, like, this is the best, and yes. I didn't get my first noise canceling until maybe like 6-7 years ago. I didn't really have a need, because I didn't listen to music in environments that were noisy. I tend to listen to music when it's like by myself or in the car. But I can't go back with the noise canceling at all.
No. I mean, if you travel, if you do any air travel, especially like, transatlantic kinds of trips, 9-10 hour trips, I don't know how anybody can survive without them. Airplanes are very noisy. But also here where I live, there's a lot of noise pollution here. All right, so there's a lot of construction, there's a lot of truck traffic, there's always screaming children, running around, and it's just a way for me to just say,
Yep.
just to quiet that out.
Yep. I just saw a Denzel interview, a short on YouTube, and he was talking about how he takes 5 minutes in the morning or sometime during the day to not do anything. And he talked about how hard it was, but he was like, don't reach for anything, don't do anything. He was like, don't think about anything. He was like, just try not to even think about anything for 5 minutes. And I could see that I would need like some white noise or something through some headphones, but just to get centered like
Yeah.
that.
It's not meditating, but it's more like stoicism. And stoicism is and you can read these philosophies. It is about quieting your mind for a period of time, to just kind of to reset, because we have so many influences coming at us
Yep.
all day long. If you took an inventory of how many things are trying to get your attention, it's shocking. Your mobile phone is constantly trying to get your attention. Your colleagues are getting your attention. Your family's trying to get your attention. Advertisers are trying to get your attention. The environment's trying to get your attention. And then sooner or later you just go, okay, I had enough stimuli.
Right.
Let me just cool down for about 5 minutes. Good for you, Denzel.
That's how I teach. That's like one of the first classes in basic graphic design is, the analogy I use is walking through a movie theater. Like you get out of the movie or you go into a movie and you're going down the hallways and you see all these movie posters. And
Yeah.
the analogy I use to the students is imagine all these movie posters can talk and they're all yelling at you. And they're all yelling for your attention. And they're doing stuff and they're just doing, and you're just passing the ones that you're not interested in, you're just passing, but there's a couple that catch your attention. They say something and you stop, or at least you look. And then some of them get you to stop. Then some of them get you to go closer. And it's like, that's design. And that's kind of start from there, right?
Good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. And also the other one is the mall theory. When I talk about websites, it's like you go through all these websites, or now it's TikToks or shorts, and it's just like you're in a mall and every store is yelling at you for your attention in the middle, on the sides, and it is yelling, yelling, yelling. And we've grown because we have these younger kids. They have so much more stimuli than we had. They're growing up with all the stimuli, so they're way better at tuning things out, in my opinion, than we are naturally. Like I think we have to set aside time, schedule quiet time,
Yeah.
or to tune out, because we hear everything. We hear the kids, we hear the traffic, we hear the everything. But these kids, they can walk around, they can be in your class with headphones in, and they can actually be paying attention while listening to something else. And then they can not hear you at all, even though you're talking to them right there. Like they can just tune you out, because it's just they have so much stimulation. So I'm wondering how that's going to affect this 20 or 30 years going forward with that extra skill that they have. I don't know if it's going to be good or bad. We'll see.
Well, thank you for that. Which is, we'll see. Mm-hmm. Because I have colleagues that they swing completely to the negative, right? Which is, oh, students don't have a good attention span now, and this whole era of TikTok, everything has to be in these short bites. And I'm not sure if we have enough evidence to say that's true or not.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the students that I have, they're as smart as the students I had 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 30 years ago. It's just that their concerns are different now.
Right.
Right. And maybe even some of their values have shifted. And obviously their access to information, the technologies that they use are different, but they're just as smart.
You're right. You're right about that. You're right about that. So one thing I'm going to touch on this a little bit. I want to talk about the two projects we worked on. While at Nationwide. So shoot, I don't even want to go through the years of how long ago that was. And then one while at OSU. All right. You see that? Okay.
Yeah, I sure do. The usability and design learning tool.
Yeah, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but we worked on this, I would say this has to be like 2003, close to there. So we're talking about a full 20 years ago. And I felt like we were so ahead of our time. I would say you were ahead of your time, because it was like, this was your idea, I remember. And I remember this is where I learned about usability as it pertains to design.
Yeah.
And this was a full course. Like, it was a full course. Like, going through things like page layout and and interface design and cross-platform applications and file formats. Where like we were trying to, the purpose of this, we were trying to educate so our clients, we were the usability and design team, and our clients were Nationwide, the teams within Nationwide. You know, Nationwide is such a humongous entity. We was like a design firm within Nationwide. So we would like had to educate them on what we did. And that was I'm assuming that was like almost like a marketing plan. So we were like educating people that knew nothing about design. And when I've pulled this back up, because it's been lost to history, and I'm gonna show you why, because so you got to bear with me. So I'm going to go to interface design. So I found this plugin, Brian, called Ruffle. And it allows you to play old Flash content within your browser. So like all the Flash content, I talked about this in another podcast, all the Flash content out there, and that was some of the best web content that came out of the web. That was all lost to history once they kind of like turned off Flash for modern browsers.
Yeah.
For like 20 years. So you couldn't see, you go to the Wayback Machine, if it was Flash content, it just showed up as white. It didn't even show up as like, this used to be Flash. It would just be like it didn't exist. So this plugin, and it's available only for Chrome, but you can see some of these, if you go back to the Wayback Machine, you can see these Flash sites. So anyway, I just wanted to go through this. We worked on this as a team effort. I really feel like it was like we did the heavy lifting, and then we had, you know, a few other people helping, like all the interns and the junior designers. But Flash, I became the Flash guy. And we worked on this, and everything had a principle, it had an example, and it had an exercise. And the exercise was something you can actually interact with. And like this right here, like, oh, it gives you, and you can like, it was like we gamified it. And this is 20 years ago. So I just wanted to point that out. Like, I felt like we were ahead of our time with this. I felt like you were ahead of your time with this. Because every one of the things in the left navigation, I could formulate a class from this tool.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we really could.
Let me, the people that are viewing this, again, when you look at this, you have to kind of recognize the context in which this was done, which is early 2000s, which, good from an interface standpoint, you know, it certainly doesn't live up to the things that we see today. That's a perfect example when you just showed that example
computer.
of that old Mac.
That's how old this is. That was the state of the art computer
Absolutely.
At the time. Yes.
That was the state of the art, but I would say one of the important things here, Brandon, thinking more broadly, is that every company or organization goes through a maturity level related to design and usability.
Yeah.
All right. So we look at a company like Apple and Google, and they are very mature in their understanding of the value of design and usability principles.
Yeah.
At the time, Nationwide was at their infancy. They didn't know very much about it because it was an engineering driven company that had, you know, basic insurance products, and they were trying to expand, and they were trying to use design and software engineering to help do that. So what you have is people at Nationwide, they've been there 10, 20 years with one orientation to how to do business. And so when you start to introduce these new concepts like user experience and design and animation, this tool became this very scalable way to get that information out. Because I don't know, one of the buildings that we were in was a 30-story building. Mm-hmm. And then we were working at another building that had a different campus that had 2 5-story buildings. I mean, it's a massive organization. So you can't possibly send all of those people to a face-to-face class.
Right.
So how do you reach them? So we developed this intranet site, right, which is you can view it on your own time, which is one of the early kind of asynchronous models of learning.
Yep.
which we see very prevalent now.
Yep.
And so that tool also has, as you pointed out, these instructional design methods, right? So everything is organized and okay, here's the principle. Here's how you apply the principle. And here's an example of it concretely. And then the gamification of it is an engagement metric, which is to keep people on the site doing things longer by making it a little entertaining, a little fun. So yeah, that was a long time ago, but I think we were all on to something. And then the last point in all that is the importance of collaboration, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we had to have somebody write the content, we had to have someone organize and generate all the examples, we had to do the animation, we had to do the development.
Yep.
It has to be uploaded into the intranet system. There's a lot. So there's a lot of players involved in a project like that are invisible.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you see the interface, you don't realize we had 12 people working. Maybe 12 people working on
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
But that was a lot of fun. Thank you for the Wayback Machine.
No doubt. Yeah, it was it taught me a lot. And it taught me it so I always tell people I entered the graphic design world during the internet boom. So I graduated in '99, so the internet was booming, and I rode the wave, and Flash came out. Like right when I was like getting into websites, Flash just happened, and it was just like a designer's dream because we could do whatever we wanted. We didn't have to like think about how can we develop that. We don't have the funds to pay a developer to do it, and we could do it all, and we can make it. It didn't follow the rules of HTML sites. It didn't follow the rules of rectangular boxes everywhere, and it was just like, and I lived in there. But through Flash, it taught me interaction design really, and that tool. I just wanted you to see that tool and how it holds up. And it's still available if you go to brandancraft.com and you go to that. I think I have that tool still as an interaction design component, but just click it. You just got to download that Ruffle app. The next project we worked on while I was a student, while I was a graduate student at Ohio State. And the premise of it was the Notting Hill, the artist of Notting Hill. So the Notting Hill, what a lot would call costume designers, they wanted to be perceived more than being just costume designers. They wanted to be perceived like in the fine arts world, like and celebrated as such. But they just felt like people put them in a box of like designing costumes and then throwing away, and then the next they just throw away. They were like throwaway objects. So they reached out to some universities in London, and there was some connections to our department and the theater department. Then, so you were talking about the collaboration aspect of it. Can you expound a little more on that?
Well, the Notting Hill Carnival, all right, so located in the Notting Hill area of London, been going on for many years. And you have these carnival bands or these carnival camps that develop these very friendly competitions around performance. And so what you were saying as well, it's way more than costume design.
Right.
All right, that these performances have meaning connected to our African and Caribbean roots, at least in that part of the world, in central London. And so not only does it involve the sort of artistry, but it also involves mechanics, because some of those costumes, they go up 12, 15 feet in the air.
Right.
And for somebody to develop a harness, for somebody to wear that and walk in it for about 4 to 5 hours in the summer, it's pretty remarkable task.
Yep.
Then there's also, you think about the collaboration. There's music that's involved. There's dance and performances that are involved. And then there's the whole logistics behind it, because this event, it draws thousands and thousands of people. not just from the central London area, but people come in from the Caribbean to
Yep.
participate in this event. So I will say that was one of the that was one of the funnest projects I've had the privilege of working on, and one where I maybe learned the most about a specific cultural diaspora. I didn't know that there were that many black folks in London.
There was a
And
lot.
so, and we're trying to figure out, how did you all get here? And they broke it down for us. It was like, hey, we were part of London's reconstruction after World War II. We came from the Caribbean and we stayed. And so, it's kind of like it puts you in a weird space the first time you hear somebody speaking patois with a British accent.
Right.
So they sound like partially Jamaican and partially British. And it's like, wow,
Wow.
we're all over the place.
We everywhere. And as soon as we would open our mouths, they're like, American. Like, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's what they called us.
Right. The Americans. But yeah, and it's like, so the collaborative effort was one thing. So you had a theater department, you had a design department, you had, what were were there theater departments over in London too?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we
We
had
have
a
a professor
historian.
that we work with. She was a historian.
Yep.
Yes.
So we had historians, designers, artists, and then we had students. So the whole thing was, okay, we have, so the first year we went, it was all research. And it was just taking photos. I mean, I still have those photos. We had to have like 6,000 photos. Like, we took photos for 3 weeks straight. Footage, videos, interviews. We had so much footage. So we gathered all the footage. And then that second year, we proposed it to students. Like, okay, here's all the information and here's the project, graduate students. And we had, I think it was like 3 or 4 groups. And it's like, see which
Yeah.
group within that class came up with the best interactive idea. And
And they were all good.
they were all good. But I remember, and I use this term to this day in every class I teach, you would say in blue sky. And blue sky meant, don't think about any technological hindrances. Just think about the best idea. And, they went at it, and then the one we're seeing right now is the idea that won. And then it was just like, okay, how are we going to do this? So that's where I came in. I was the teaching assistant in that class, and I was there to basically help them navigate Flash. Not to teach it to them. They had to kind of like
Yeah.
teach it to themselves, and I was there to help them. And we came up with this interactive piece that, to this day, I don't know how I would create this without Flash. Like, I think we would have to pay a developer $40,000 to do something like that. So, and it was an interactive piece, and the main point of this interactive piece was that it was not a website. It was not meant to be on the web. It was meant to be as a kiosk that anybody can access and then walk away from. And so there couldn't be a homepage. There was no hub. And and as soon as somebody like touched the screen or touched the mouse, it would have to move to let them know that they can do something. And
Yeah.
yeah.
So how do you prompt the interaction when somebody just walks up to the application? All right. So this is an application that's different than some goal-directed thing like a travel website where, start here, I want to do my search, I find my airline ticket, and I book my ticket. But this was more experiential, right? Which is, well, what can I discover in this app, and then how does it become self-teaching as quickly as possible? So that was one of the unique things about that for the time in which it was done.
Right. Ahead of its time, I still contend. Because you used the key couple words, self-teaching. Like, there was no time for instructions. This would be displayed in a museum atmosphere where people are going from piece to piece and mingling. And there was no time to figure it out. It just had to work. And this is
Yeah.
another one of the projects that I think it really excelled my experience just in that user experience space. I started thinking more about user experience and less about interaction design. Like the interaction
Yeah.
design was just, of course, but it really, where the magic happened was with the user experience.
There's also talking about collaboration. The audio tracks were very important in that piece also,
Yep.
because there was a series of audio tracks that let you know that you were in a sort of different section, or different content module of the app. And I remember I remember this whistle sound that we use. It was like, and that's just one of these things when you hear that, you go, you kind of turn to it, like when you hear a bell, right?
Yep.
You go, oh, what's that? And so even the audio, as passers would go by, would draw people in from time to time.
Yeah. And that was a big deal for the exhibit because I remember one of your pitches was these Notting Hill Carnival is not a quiet event. We don't want to, like, the first initial idea was just to display their pieces in a museum environment, like a quiet,
Yeah.
sterile. So you see in museum and you see this 17-foot costume with a placard next to it. But I remember your argument was no. At Carnival, it's the loudest thing going. It's music, it's talking, it's a lot going on. So you need us to develop an interactive piece that can complement the whole scene, this whole museum
Yeah.
environment. So I think that interactive piece, it I would say it activated the
Yeah.
space. I feel like it served to activate. And we had like maybe 3 stations, and I know it
Hmm.
toured around the country, but the one I kind of experienced in London and Ohio State, it had like 3 spaces. So
And I always remember, and I tell people this is maybe one of my biggest regrets. At that exhibition, in walks this very distinguished and recognizable celebrity, and it was Colin Salmon,
yep,
who had been in several films, really tall, handsome man, and he was being even talked about as like the next James Bond
yep.
at that time. And we spoke with him. He was a big fan of Carnival, and he looked at our exhibition and our application, and he was very complimentary. And then here's the regret. See if you remember this. He says, Prince is doing a performance over in Piccadilly. You guys want to come? And we ended up passing. I don't remember why, but we are like, no, we got something else going on, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, I can't believe I passed up a chance to see Prince in a live performance in Piccadilly.
And I'm gonna put that on you because there's no way in hell that I would have. I'm like, Brian, you got to hear. Like, I'll take pictures. We can use this for the next thing, like something. If I would have heard that, man, I think we were in full like work mode. I think we had worked so
Yeah.
hard on that thing. I think we were just in full like realization of
Yeah.
the work right there. Yep. But
Now, we had to generate a report, and we have to do setup, and it was across a couple of days. And anyway, well,
yeah,
hindsight's 2020, as they say.
right. All right. So I want to get into, like I said, Brian is an author, and he has just published his second book. Well, I think this is your first like book by yourself, right?
Yes.
Yes. So he just came out with a book. It is called. There it goes right there. Let me go. Oh, there it goes. So, Stories, Quips, and Quotes: A Designer's Guide to Teaching and Learning. And I recommend it. I recommend this book wholeheartedly because, first of all, it's a fun read. It's a quick read. And it's one of those things that you can kind of read over and over. You can just kind of pick over it. It's almost like, I bet you can like formulate this into a coffee table book easily. I'm almost throwing that in the atmosphere. That maybe should happen. It's very coffee table book-ish because you can pick it up, read something cool, put it back down. It's talking about interaction. First of all, why did you write the book?
Okay.
Yeah.
You have to give me a little bit of time on this one.
Okay.
So I was teaching a class at Ohio State University some time ago, and I was arguing with the students on a project deliverable. I said the project is due next week, and they said, no, it's due in 2 weeks. No, it's next week. No, in 2 weeks. We go back and forth. And this one young lady named Chloe very quietly says, last Tuesday at 10:38, Brian said the project's due next week. So now all the students are mad, right? Like, "Ah." But later I went to Chloe and I said, you seem to take very detailed notes. And she goes, Brian, I write down everything you say. I have 2 notebooks. I have one notebook for all of my classes. I have another notebook for you. Now, I didn't know whether to be flattered or scared when somebody says something like that. But she went on to say, you just have a way of making your points in a very concise and very memorable way. And so she started telling me, I remember you said this, I remember you said this, I remember you said that. And that was the kind of first prompt, right? Which was, I remember when you said. So then, having students over the last 25 years, and I meet them, and they'll almost always say to me, Brian, I remember when you said this. So I started cataloging those things in a Google Doc. Just when I would meet somebody, they would say something, I would put it in a Google Doc. And then after, I have to say, maybe 4 years of collecting this stuff, I had about 100 quotes. I said, boy, you've been doing a lot of talking. But then getting to the point, why there's a lot of books out there on how to do things, like how to do things in a certain software application, how to do things in, 2-dimensional, 3-dimensional software. There's books on design principles. There's lots of books on design history. But I found very few books, if any, that talked about the mindset and attitude required to be successful in design. And so I thought, okay, well, you've got a different angle here on, you're going to run into certain situations as a professional and as a student. What's the best way to handle those situations? All right, which is, I think, one of the things I said is, you should get fired from a job. Because when you get fired, then you are forced to reflect, right? Like, well, so I didn't do something right.
Yep.
All right. And so what do I need to do to prepare myself properly for the next experience?
Well, shoot, I want to get into the book. And there's 3 sections that I just want to kind of highlight that caught my eye. So on page 19, the quote. So the structure of the book, and I'm just going to show it. I think the structure of the book is cool. Most of the pages have a quote and then an explanation of a quote. And both are brief. I think the design of the book is well done, Brian.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So the quote on this page is, you can add more yeast, sugar, or flour, but it ain't going to bake that cake any faster. Okay? And then the explanation you gave, well, you give the explanation real quick, and I'm gonna tell you how it hit me.
Okay, well, the reality is that design and design research takes time, and sometimes it's unpredictable how much time it takes. Sometimes you can come up with a solution very, very quickly, but oftentimes you have to go through a lot of processes, and so we end up getting pressures from clients, and they either throw more resources at it or throw more money at it. We even get those pressures from instructors at a certain level, and it's just to sort of help people understand, like, reset, and you have to exercise patience. You have to exercise diligence, but you also have to exercise patience. So just because you're throwing more things at it doesn't mean that it's going to get resolved any faster.
Right. So yeah, this is what I took from it. When I heard throwing resources at it, I'm thinking technology. So throw Photoshop at it, throw Illustrator at it, throw Canva at it, throw After Effects at it, throw a lot of people, a
Yeah.
lot of quote unquote designers nowadays, not even nowadays, forever, they they think they can just throw technology at it. And like for instance, the designers that just learned Photoshop or just bought Photoshop, and now they think they're a designer type of people. And I was like, you can't just throw technology at design. But what I kind of saw between the lines is, and I wanted to ask you is, in the context of AI being a new tool,
Yeah.
how do you feel about that quote? You can add more yeast and flour, yeast, sugar and flour, but it ain't gonna bake that cake any faster. And it feels like this AI revolution that we're embarking on is all about trying to make things faster. So how do you feel about that?
Yes. Yes. Uh, Simply, yes, it does make things faster. It doesn't make it better. And I've seen things that have come from generative AI, and I don't think it's very good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there still needs to be people who have a very discerning and critical eye that can vet things properly that are generated from AI, and that too will take time. Um, re- re- so I just kind of draw this analogy to email,
Yeah.
and it was the same argument. All right, so when we got email, oh, we're going to be able to do this and do this and do this and all email. What has email actually done? It slowed us down
You're right.
because we got this tidal wave of content coming at us that they're asking us to deal with.
Yep.
So AI, we shouldn't run from it. And I know people that are, they're rather intimidated by it. They'll say things like, "Oh, AI is going to take our jobs." No, it's the people that understand AI and leverage it are the ones that are going to take your jobs.
Yeah.
All right, so you use AI, but you become more discerning on how it's used, what its output is, and you're still going to have to make some contributions to it. You just don't say, "Okay, it's all done." Maybe AI is the kind of baseline or foundation that you can start with,
Yep.
and then you start to add your own layers.
Right. Yeah. It's like in my circle, it's scaring a lot of professors. I don't want to say yeah, it's scaring. Only thing they can think about is cheaters. It's like they can't get
Yeah,
out of
yeah.
that. Is just they're gonna cheat, and I'm almost like to the point where I've mentioned this in the meetings. It's just like, but I don't want to hurt people's feelings, but I'm like, you need to teach better. It's like, okay, don't think, okay, you want them to write essays to prove that they know the content, but you're teaching biology or you're teaching something else. You're not teaching writing. So maybe do they have to write an essay? Is there any other way they can prove that they know the content? And like, how about that? Has anybody thought about that? So I think it's
That's exactly it. You have to restructure your pedagogical models, right? Which is now you've got this technology that's been inserted.
Mhm.
Well, it can't take it out now. It's already here. All right, so let's go back to what are the learning goals? What are the principles that you want to impart in your class? And then how do we rethink the types of lessons that we need to craft to be able to extract that?
Yep.
All right, when you're just taking what you've already done in the past for the last, decade or two and try to apply it using these new technologies, of course the first reaction is going to be, "Oh, they're going to cheat." All right, well then give them a different set of tasks so they can demonstrate their competencies around a certain topic or content.
right.
That's where the challenge is going to be.
That's where the challenge is going to be. You're right, and I want to be at the cusp of that challenge. But so the second section that caught my eye, just in a different wavelength, is page 21, where the quote is, "System thinkers do well." That's the quote. System thinkers do
Yeah.
well. As soon as I read that quote, I thought about me. I was like, I'm a system thinker, even before I read the explanation. But explain what you meant by system thinkers do well.
Okay, so the systems thinkers, it simply means uh, So let's go back. So a system is component parts that coexist to create a unified whole. And we always kind of use the term ecosystem. All right. And then all of a sudden you have some kind of invasive species that disrupts the ecosystem. So there's this sort of analogy. So systems thinkers, I think about designers that understand how their work connects to marketing, and how marketing's work connects to sales, and how sales connects to C-suite, and how design might connect to engineering or business. So they can think more broadly, more holistically, more 10,000 foot view. Because then when you become a systems thinker, you become a great facilitator. You're the person that can come in the room with all of these other disciplines, right? And get everybody together and get everybody moving in the same direction.
Yep.
Because one of the, of course, downsides that we have is, corporations and universities are too organized in stovepipes. All right, so you got this discipline, then on the next floor, it's the other discipline, and in the other building, it's the other discipline. And it's really hard physically to make those bridges.
Yep.
But people that can think about that, process it, and connect the dots appropriately, they're the ones that are going to, I think, do the very best in all of these dynamics that we have to work through moving forward.
I agree. And I feel like when I read that quote, I was like, I'm a system thinker. Because, one, I did not study graphic design in college.
Yeah.
So I studied architecture and fine art and computer science. So computer science and the architecture are kind of describe what you were describing as far as like how you look at, especially computer science. It's just rules. There's a whole bunch of rules to create what you wanted to create. You had to follow rules, not just, painting and doing whatever you wanted. You tried to do whatever you wanted, but you had to follow these very, 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 very strict rules. And I feel like as a designer, it's helped me for these last 25 years of designing because I still adhere to those rules. And one of those rules, most of those rules tied to a user or whoever I'm creating something for, whether it's art, whether it's not art. And I think I was explaining to you before as far as the architecture students that I've gotten in my class. So, when I worked at FAM, I would get some architecture students. They would either take my class as an elective or they would start tipping their toes in the water of thinking of changing their major. But whenever I got an architecture student, they were either 1 or 1A in the class every time. And you gave a good explanation of why you think that is. What was that?
Well, they, again, architects, also musicians, they have to think in layers, right? They don't think about one singular thing. They have to think about how this connects to something else vertically and how it connects horizontally. And that's also very much about systems thinking. But the other thing is that they understand studio-based learning. All right, and they understand that your learning will come from trial and error. All right, we have some disciplines, and they believe I did it, therefore I should get credit for it. Versus architecture, design, sometimes music, sometimes theater, which is I did it and it failed. What did I learn from this? And then they move on.
And
I think that's one of the reasons that they've had some success in your class.
Yes. They're just, yes. And they build everything, especially in UI design. Like they will flourish in those kind of environments because they think user first naturally. Like it's hard to design a door for a house without thinking about who's walking through that door.
Put the doorknob up here.
Yes. And this is natural where the usual design students I get who are usually come in as freshmen as artists, and then they just think, I don't know if I want to be an artist, for the rest of my life. Let's choose design. It's like trying to reprogram them to think user first, when they've kind of like, in K through 12, usually the art teachers are like, everything you do is beautiful. Everything you do is great.
Yeah.
Art is up for interpretation, and you just put it on the wall. Whereas UI is not meant to be on the wall. And it might not be beautiful, but it may work. Or it might work, and it might not. It might be beautiful, and it might not work. Like, I get a lot of designers like that. They'll make, especially when they get into the first interaction design class, it's like they forget how to design. It's like they forget all the design principles, and they just try to create something that's going to work, but it's ugly. I'm like, okay, you're a designer. Nobody's going to hire you as a developer. Like, one thing you have to bring to the table is aesthetics, if nothing else. And then it has to work also. So,
yeah.
All right. The last page, not the last page, but the one that caught my eye. And in the way, I love the way this book is designed too, because it has these like purple pages interspersed. And it gives a good aesthetic on this part. I know you can't see it, but I'm a designer. I like that, caught my eye.
Yeah.
But this page didn't necessarily have a quote. But so on this page, you're talking about the importance of quality teachers, and how you've always talked about like the teachers you've had and the influence they've had on you. And so when I'm internalizing, I'm reading this book from my perspective. I felt like I was the opposite. Like I had good teachers, but I didn't have memorable teachers. I would say in higher education, I had 2 memorable teachers, and you're one of them, right? That kind of changed my trajectory and really pushed me. But the first one was, and I forgot his name, but he was my graphic design teacher at Pitt. But it was the only graphic design class, and it was an elective. That's where I found out what graphic design was. Like, I didn't even know what graphic design was. I was doing it. I was like creating posters and stuff, but I didn't know what it was until I had that class. And after I had that class, another influential, he wasn't a teacher, but he was our dean. After that class, I went, and the whole thing you're talking about is how good teachers can like shape people's lives. And this dean shaped my life. The teacher shaped my life by introducing me to graphic design and telling me to learn Macromedia Dreamweaver. Because it was 1998, and he saw, hey, learn AI, learn prompt engineering. He saw the internet, and he saw what was about to happen. And he was like, hey, if you want to be a graphic designer now, you have to know web design. So I appreciate him for that. I actually reached out to him on LinkedIn maybe a year ago just to say thank you. I found him, and I just said thanks. But then I went to my dean, and I said, hey, I'm an architectural studies major, but I don't want to do it anymore. And I'm a junior, and I don't want to change, and there's no graphic design major. So would you allow me to formulate my own curriculum for the remainder? There's like a year and a half left, and take more classes that will pertain to being a graphic designer and less because I think I had another physics class, another calculus class, and had all these classes, and he allowed me to do so. I drew up a proposal, like a curriculum proposal, and I had to I did it all up, did it well, and he approved it, and he kind of allowed me to substitute in classes in order for me to graduate, and that was dope. But I wasn't shaped by a set of or an institution that taught me a certain way of doing graphic design, right?
Yeah.
So I remember when I first met you at Nationwide, and when you gave me my introduction at the Creative Control Fest, you described me as raw, like I was a raw designer. And I was, because I didn't have any formal training. I was just kind of doing it. And and you got me at that time, and you helped shape me, because I was just raw. I was just a raw artist. I was just like an artist. I felt like I was an artist doing design. but I didn't know what the hell design was until you kind of showed it to me. You didn't teach it to me because we were colleagues. You weren't my professor. You were just like critiquing my stuff and giving me hints, and some I didn't take well. I had to learn how to take critique, and so I did that. That page made me think of like our relationship. Like you were that teacher. Like whereas you had like these teachers that kind of shape you, I felt like you, along with that graphic design teacher, kind of shaped me. And then when I first started teaching, I used his class assignments as a basis of how I created my assignments. And I used kind of like how you taught as like a basis of how I was going to teach. So,
Well, I appreciate you sharing that.
yeah.
Uh, I didn't know all of these things, so thank you. And yeah, I was the benefactor of, I think, very good teachers, but you had kind of flashed up a page very quickly of my favorite picture of my father, which is kind of curious because you can't see his face.
Mm-hmm.
His back is turned to us, but he is talking to my two children at the time when they were very young,
Yep.
and he was explaining the origins of the Star Spangled Banner, the United States national anthem,
Yep.
which was written in Baltimore, where I grew up, and he was describing it to my children, and I was watching him of how vivid and clear of a description that he had made. And then you just kind of look at the Inner Harbor now, and you can't visualize British warships in the 1800s coming in to invade this country, but that's what was happening.
Right.
And I just kind of remember, like, how impactful and profound his ability to describe things was. And so with that, I think maybe it's somewhat inherited that I got that ability from him, and that's why I put that picture in the book.
Yep.
But then at the same time, my mother taught in the Baltimore City school system for 37 years. So we want to talk about patience.
Yeah.
But my mother was a very patient teacher. Right? I would watch her too, and so I kind of have this hybrid between my parents of these descriptors, but also this patience of how you establish one's learning. And let me just say one more thing,
Yep.
if I could. Uh, when I started teaching, the best advice I got from anybody was from Chris Myers, and Chris Myers wrote the foreword of the book,
Yep.
and it's unlike any foreword that you'll ever read because this foreword is more like a poem
Yep. It is.
than it is like a book introduction. But he said, Brian, you had this professor, this professor, this professor. Don't try to teach like them. You don't know what's in their head. You don't have their background. You don't have their narrative. What you should do is recognize the values that they were trying to impart. And then you deliver those values using your voice, not theirs. And it kind of empowered me at that moment to be myself and not try to be, a duplicate of this professor and that professor. And so that's how my teaching came about, and that's why these quotes are expressed the way they do, which is why this book, if I can hold this up, is why this book is very different than this book.
Word.
Right? Because this book comes from a academic perspective. What this book is trying to do is just as you described, and thank you, is trying to be a fun read. It's a little tongue-in-cheek. It's non-linear, so you don't have to start at page 1 and finish at page 180. You can just flip through, go to page 57, read a couple things, put it down, come back to it later. That's all very kind of purposeful.
Right.
And it's metaphorically, if I could say, it's metaphorical to like a recipe book.
Yeah. I s-
And you just flip through and say, what am I in the mood for today?
Yep. Because there's no
And
table
then
of
you read.
contents.
Yeah,
Like the first thing I
exactly.
went to is I was trying to find a table of contents. Like, okay, no table of contents. So that means there's no order. Like
Yes.
that's a unwritten. You don't have to like explain it. You don't have to like write it in the forward. Like, okay, there's no order to this book. You can flip to wherever you want. It's just like implied. So I looked at this book as a literary piece, but I also experienced it because I'm a geek. I experienced it as a user experience. Like what I was thinking that you were thinking when you were organizing the book, right?
Mm.
So I know I call it the gift and the curse that we have as creatives is that you just don't see the world the same anymore. So I'm not just reading the quotes and reading the book and enjoying the book. I'm thinking about like what's he thinking about the color choices he's making or the organization of it or the font he
Yeah.
used and you know I was thinking about all that which makes it dope because you need the book. A Kindle version, the electronic version won't be the same,
Yeah.
right? An
Yeah. Yeah.
audio book, you don't want to read this as an audio book. Now, I would put this out there though. Say you came out with an accompaniment, because some of these quotes don't make as much sense because you're not saying them. You
Yeah.
say some of these
Yeah.
quotes, the way you say them accentuates the point or makes it uniquely you. So maybe there's an audio accompaniment you put on Spotify or something.
I have heard this. I've heard this from some people. You know, I get feedback and they write, Brian, I can hear you when I'm reading this.
Right,
But those are people that know me.
right.
The challenge is, how do I get people that don't know me to hear it with that same kind of intonation? So maybe there's an audio compliment coming out.
Right on rbrianstone.com. The accompaniment. It only comes with a purchase of the book. That's there it goes. That's how it happens. Now I didn't. So I went through all the quotes, and there's one quote that I've always remembered from you. Then I use in my classes to this day. I use it whenever a student comes to my class crying, whenever they're struggling, whenever they're questioning their abilities, and I'll say, nothing bad comes from good work.
So let me say a few things that are related to that nothing bad comes from good work. But there's also a quote in the book about making sure that people know you're responsible for the good work. So people will say sometimes about, oh, shameless self promotion.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the reality is you should self promote and you should feel no guilt and no shame in doing so, because if you don't do it, who is?
Who will? You right.
And then the other part, which is got a kind of a quote that like raises eyebrows, is the Exacto knife and Philadelphia cream cheese quote, which is Exacto knives and Philadelphia cream cheese is about quality,
Yep.
right? If you go on the cheap, you are not going to have a good cheesecake if you use store brand cheese, cream cheese. And if you use cheap blades, they're going to slip and you're going to cut your finger.
You right. Yeah.
So all of
Yeah.
those things are kind of interconnected. So with that, I put this together really for two audiences. One for professors that are starting their career and trying to find their voice in the classroom, right? Or is this, how am I going to articulate these principles in a way that are going to resonate with students deeply?
Mm-hmm.
But then also it's for students and budding designers so they can prepare themselves for what they're going to experience, not only in the classroom, because it can be very rigorous,
Yeah.
as we know, but what you're going to experience as a young professional. So with that, I started putting this together, and I don't want to leave this out. I would not have finished this if it weren't for the constant pushing of three of my students who were constantly saying, Are you making any progress? Are you doing anything? Are you working on this? Do you need any help? So they're like constantly like, go, go, go. You're getting close. You're getting close. You're getting close. And I acknowledge those three young ladies in the front matter of the book.
Good. Good.
So I'd like people to think about this as a recipe book for designers. The intent is that this is a fun and brief read that hopefully will prove useful, drawing on my 30 years of teaching experience, not just at the university level, but also professional continuing education. And I'm sure that your audience will enjoy it. I appreciate the time.